Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today I want to talk about this, the Seagate Ironwolf Pro NT series of hard drives. We've talked about Seagate Ironwolf for a long time on the channel, and with their Pro series of drives now arriving in a new, more durable version, I think now is the time to revisit that subject in another Should You Buy Before You Buy, a video where I give you 5 reasons why you may well want to consider the Ironwolf Pro 20TB and soon to arrive 22TB drives for your data storage within your NAS and otherwise, and 5 reasons why you might stay on the fence a little bit longer. Now, I have done a massive review of this drive already. We did noise testing, performance testing, compatibility testing with Synology and QNAP. We did PC benchmark testing with a bunch of AJA, Atto, Blackmagic, you name it, and ultimately went through the drive with a fine-tooth comb as much as we could. That video went on for ages, and that is for people that wanted everything, but this video is about a bullet point. Should you or shouldn't you go for this drive? Hopefully short form, and hopefully you find it useful. But without further ado, let's crack on with point number 1. That's right, it's all about the old Wonga, innit? A lot of you are going to be considering a lot of the Seagate Ironwolf Pro series of drives for its price point, because let's be frank about this, these larger capacity drives are not cheap. Obviously, the bigger the drive they are, the more capacity there is, and the price per terabyte doesn't change a great deal when you look at a 2TB or a 20TB. There's only a few different dollars between them, but at the same time, it's about that price per terabyte. And when you compare the Seagate Ironwolf Pro versus that of the WD Red Pro, these do come off at a lower price per terabyte. Not just the 20TB, I might add, but the rest of the range. Typically, you do find that the Seagate Ironwolf drives knock in about 3 to 5% difference in price, and in most cases lower. Now, it's not a lot, 3 to 5%, but once you really rack that down, I hate seagulls, then you start racking into those hundreds of pounds that these drives can cost. And with the 20TB, depending on whether you go for the new NT version, the older NE version, or the Pro or not Pro at all, at 20TB, you're looking at somewhere between about $500 for about $580. Other currencies are available. And when you look at the price difference between it and the 20 and 22TB WD Red Pro drive, you do start to see that price difference reflected there overall. So, if you are looking at a drive where you want the lowest price per terabyte, but at the same time want the Pro or Enterprise class series of drives, the Seagate Ironwolf Pro tends to be that lower price point. And we move away from the subject of price and move into the avenue of value. What do you get for that money? Now, as this is a Pro series class drive, I would say bordering on the Enterprise class, more on that later on, there are lots of the things that you kind of accept to be in there. That guy's really losing it up there. Firstly, you've got your 5 years warranty there, of course. Also, as it's a Pro Series drive, it is designed for larger RAID arrays, again between 8 and 24 bays. On top of that, when you've got that enterprise level build there, you've got your 7200 RPM, you've got 256 mega cache, and it's, helium sealed there across all of those platters. 10 platters there at 2 TB platters each. It doesn't really set it too far apart from its competitors there. Where it does set it apart from its competitors is it arrives with data recovery services included. Seagate have rolled out on a lot of their drives, not just the NAS class ones as well, but we're seeing it appear in more and more data recovery services included with these drives with their rescue. 3 years of inclusive data recovery from the day of purchase, and that isn't just a simple case of, oh, is it knackered, use some this software to recover it. We're talking forensic level, sent to a data center for recovery. We already explored this on the channel a few years ago, and we're hoping to revisit that later in 2023. It's always a subject that always seems to be coming, and then other stuff gets in the way. But we have tested with a drive that we, and you shouldn't do this, smashed the drive around a bit, sent it to Seagate under their rescue, and we managed to get it back with the majority of data intact. It is something that currently is only available with their platform, and although there is negligible return there once you factor these drives into a multi-bay RAID array where data can be spread across all of those drives. When the data recovery becomes substantially harder to work from, it's still nice that it's included within the drive anyway. And with smaller arrays, there's a higher chance of the recovery being possible there forensically. But again, that's something you only get, and that's not just limited to the Pro or this NT series either. Now this is going to be one of those points where we drill into the benefits of the NT series, the newer generation of Seagate Ironwolf Pro drives, over that of the previous NE series, but I'll go into a little bit more detail on that later on. But the biggest standalone part of that is that the Pro series of drives like this one are getting kind of enterprise class durability. One of the longest running kind of debate, arguably, by tech professionals, definitely data storage professionals, as we get into larger capacities, is that the workload limit that drives are rated to survive, that is typically measured at terabytes per annum or terabytes per year within the 5-year warranty cycle. As drives get larger in capacity, the rated workloads haven't gone up. So what you've ended up with is, say, standard class NAS drives like this one. This is a Seagate Ironwolf 14TB. Like, you know, WD, Toshiba, all those drives out there, standard class NAS drives. These ones rated up to about 8 bays of NAS, capacity. These systems are rated up to 180 terabyte workload annually. Now, on the face of it, having that number, that's really, really good. But when you've got the same workload limit on a 1TB drive as you have on a 14TB drive, and you calculate that over data accrued on there and increased performance and write activity, that workload doesn't really balance out, and there's a tipping point there. Now, when you look at Pro Series drives, again, this is part of the NE series, so this is what came before this. This is an Ironwolf Pro drive. This arrives with a 300 TB workload, which again, more than 100, or is 120 terabytes per year better than that standard class drive, and that's really, really good. But again, with that drive getting up to 20 TB, there is the question that the large capacity kind of has diminishing return on that annual workload limit, which is why the NE series seems to be stylized on an enterprise level drive. Now, whether Seagate did this to simplify production because of workload limits and wanting to increase that, or simply hardware shortages, let's face it, that could be a factor. But the rollout of the NT series is effectively a Pro series drive with an enterprise class durability, which translates into 550 terabytes annual workload. So that is almost double that of the NE series that we just talked about there. That also increases on mean time between failure, MTBF, rating from 1.2 million to 2.5 million hours. Now, MTBF isn't a figure that everyone really rolls with, because it's about the failure point between drives, and unless you are running a high-end enterprise data center setup there where those downtime hours can be aggregated together, it's not a great stat these days. It's still got the 6,000 unload cycles and the cache build, very similar in cache build and RPM and build quality to that other Pro Series drive. But it's about that increased durability that this drive arrives with, and one of the reasons why the NT series has a differing price point to the NE series that came before it, but more on that later on. Now, this point extends a little bit more to all of the Seagate Ironwolf Pro Series drives, but definitely the larger capacity, and that is that Seagate state that this can hit transfer rates of 285 megabytes per second. Now, in my review, I was able to get really, really close to that number, and I was using a fairly low-end domestic class Intel i5 11th Gen 16 gig PC there. In NAS performance testing, because their benchmarks are non-configurable, I was hitting around the 250 to 260 mark there, but on the PC benchmarks I got exceedingly close, and when I lowered a lot of the calibrations there with the file sizes there, I was able to hit that number and exceed it. Bear in mind the performance benchmarks issued by Seagate, and indeed most hard drive manufacturers, these are centered around quite high performance systems, and with particular block and file sizes in mind to hit peak. So sometimes those results, although are synthetic and therefore not hugely representative of the average user, but still I was able to hit the late 270s and hit and exceed the 280 there in my testing, and that was using a straight deck commercial consumer class setup there. So again, some great performance there to be had. Finally, another exclusive Seagate feature that you only get on their drives, which again, not everyone's going to use, but it's nice to have it there, and that is Ironwolf Health Management. Anyone that's been testing and monitoring hard drives for a long time, one of the ways and one of the easiest ways that most people use to monitor the health of a drive is SMART, or smart testing there. That basically benchmarks the drive, and you can get real-time information about a range of characteristics that are being monitored on the drive to see if any of those drop, which can then indicate poor drive health there. Now, on top of that, you have Ironwolf Health Management, which includes a whole bunch of further tests on top of that, which then, when one of those triggers, gives you a slightly more small granular indication of drives failing outside of the traditional smart testing. Now, Ironwolf Health Management is included with every Seagate Ironwolf drive, Pro or otherwise, and most NAS brands have now included the Ironwolf Health Management tool in their own storage managers. So alongside the ability to go into any drive's stats within the NAS graphical user interface and check its smart testing there and perform smart tests, you can also action Ironwolf Health Management test as well on a schedule, which is another degree of drive internal check measurements to know if the drive is showing even the smallest incremental issues on board. And again, a lot of those include the sort of stuff you get in smart testing and outside of that as well. Although it is worth highlighting that although it arrives on every new drive, it still requires the firmware on each NAS brand to update to include the newest drives to actually interface with that software, which is why a lot of the time when you see newer generation and newer capacity of drive arriving from Seagate, that a drive arrives and then the Ironwolf Health Management tool isn't readily available, and then later down the line it's turned on. But at the moment, any drive under 18 TB, I've always found the Ironwolf Health Management tool within the respective NAS storage manager. In the case of this 20 TB NT though, don't be surprised if it takes a few months longer. But that's enough of 5 reasons why you might want to go for this drive. It isn't perfect, nothing is. So let's talk about the 5 reasons why you might want to sit on the fence just a little bit longer. So first up, we gotta talk about noise. We've got this drive here, we're going to install it in here alongside a bunch of other Pro Series class drives there. If we get that inside there, and we power this device up, this will give you some idea what I mean. Now, yes, you are going to hear the NAS there in the background, but it's really important that you clock just how much noise these drives are going to make here. So what I'm going to do is remain silent for the better part of a minute to give you some idea. I'm sorry about the seagulls. So as you probably heard there, even straight away there was very light noise coming from that system when that was just initial, initialization of the drives within the system. The minute you start running high frequency and high volume operations with the device, anything that's even slightly more IOP optimized, even blocky sequential data, you're going to pick up more. Just bear in mind that enterprise class drives, because of those increased numbers of platters, because of that 7200 RPM, and because they are designed for a much quicker spin up, spin down and reaction to what they're doing, the result is that enterprise class drives, anything above 10 TB in fact, are going to make more noise. And in the case of the NT built on enterprise grade class on it at 20 terabytes, this is going to be a noisy NAS. So you're not going to want to be in the same room as a few of these. Next up, we've got to tackle putting all our eggs in one basket here. In the case of the Seagate Ironwolf Pro, we have to at least stress that buying one of these isn't really an option. And what you're going to encounter whenever you're dealing with a large capacity drive is that although it's great to have 20 terabytes, if you have this drive and you're putting, premium data on there, you're putting mission critical data, you're putting irreplaceable data on there, you're instantly going to have to buy two. So if this drive, even if it is 500 to 600 nicker, you're already going to have to spend $1,000 to 1,200 just to make sure that the rest of your data is safe in form of redundancy and or backups there. Particularly once you start talking about larger rack mount arrays, these drives, because you're going for 20 TB and you're speccing for the future, they kind of arrive with an instant double spend at the very, very least. So as good as 20 TB sounds, just bear in mind that no, it might be easier for you to go for a couple of 10s and rate those together at the same price point, maybe saving a few bob and also allowing yourself to have a backup. Yes, it's good to plan for the future, but just remember, all eggs one basket is not always for everyone. Now this last point hopefully is one that's going to go away in the next 3 to 6 months, or at the very least will be cleared up online, and that is the pricing for Seagate Ironwolf Pro series, because there's now two different versions in the NE and NT series, and one of them being significantly more durable and newer. The pricing is all over the place if you look online, and a lot of vendors do not know the drives they are sending out to people, or worse still, they are receiving drives from a supplier and aren't really tracking the model IDs enough. Yes, in most cases, most reputable e-tailers will keep track of the different SKUs and the different part numbers, and they'll be priced based on the channel, suppliers, sale and demand, blah blah blah. But that's not the case everywhere, and all too often you're seeing these drives being sold online where the model IDs have been scraped from a price feed somewhere, and either you are looking at drives online that in one way or another will state they're the NT series, but they're not, and the price tag seems awfully low, or on the flip side, you'll be looking at drives that are not listed as the NT, and they're actually the NT series there, and they're a better drive than you're seeing on there. And that kind of confusion online, I think, although there's different branding being put here, is still no means clear. Even when I was doing my review of this drive to go out here on YouTube and on NAS Compares there, I was looking online to see if anyone had reviewed the NT series of that drive, and barely anyone had. But at the same time, because no one really lists or, outside of traditional IT sector refers to these drives by their model ID, they're just known as Seagate Ironwolf Pro, the result is most people don't know which one they're going for, or that the review they're reading or the price they're paying for is one drive from the other. Yes, it's a relatively new drive, and hopefully that presentation will change and be better presented in time, but right now it can lead to confusion for a number of people at checkout in home and business to know they're going for the correct drive that's at the correct price. Now this point harks back to a video that I did at the end of 2022 where I was talking about, is it better to go for more smaller hard drives or go for fewer big hard drives there? Now this pertains to that because regardless of the Seagate Ironwolf Pro, NT, NE series, whatever, it's worth remembering that bigger hard drives, well, they get all that extra capacity, and sometimes you can get a better price per terabyte, although the newness and availability impacts everything. It's worth highlighting that larger capacity hard drives, and particularly Pro and Enterprise larger class drives, use more power in hibernation. They're comparable in active use, but when it comes to hibernation, they use more power, which again, given most NAS systems spend more time in hibernation, at least in home and SMB and prosumer scenarios, so you spend more time in hibernation than in active use, that higher power consumption can be reflected in your old electricity bill. On top of that, larger drives arriving in larger arrays require more cooling, more active fans and more powerful systems in order to capitalize on that larger potential performance there. The result is even higher power consumption there as well. The point I'm making is, as good as larger capacity drives can be, make sure you take just a few extra minutes to work out what your power consumption is going to be. Because just because you go for the larger drive and you're not worried too much about that standby power consumption extra, it's reflected in additional cooling measures within larger NAS systems, higher CPU power as the arrays get bigger, and a larger amount of work for the system to maintain operational temperatures. These are all very small margins, but when you add them up over the days, weeks, months, and indeed years, they can add up to numbers that you might not want to know about. This last point is because someone will always say this in the comments, and although they've got a point, I don't think it's as relevant as some people think, and that is, if going and spending 500 to 600 nickel on a 20 TB drive when SSDs are becoming substantially more affordable might be something that you should, stop in your tracks and think about, because yes, you can't get commercial or even, online semi-business SSDs up to 20 TB. You can't. You can go to specialist development centers where they'll build U.2 drives or even SATA SSDs that will give you that huge amount of capacity, but then you've got to go really specialist, basically almost practically made to order. But at the same time, the performance benefits that are presented to you by modern SSDs, sometimes the time that will save in terms of production costs for a lot of you out there, or just the time that you'll save doing operations versus that of hard drives, even in a RAID array where their performance benefits, could save you enough money that it would offset buying more SSDs to make up the capacity shortfall. To put that into perspective, remember, this drive, again, is between 500-600 nickel for that 20 TB there. So again, the math behind that price per terabyte isn't the end of the world. But if you look at bottom grade SATA SSDs, thanks to evolution in QLC NAND, quad layered cell NAND, which although significantly lower in durability, which is a key concern for a lot of users, why you may well be opting for hard drives rather than SSDs, still, at SATA, at 8 TB, you're looking at around $80 to $90 per terabyte. Now, that obviously changes between brands, but $80 to $90 per terabyte based on a between 1 and 8 TB SATA drive scale might be affordable to you. And then you could look at the performance benefits moving away from a 400-500 meg SSD to a 3,000-4,000 to 5,000-7,000 megabytes per second M2M NVMe, with these having a price per terabyte of around 100 to around about 120, maybe $125 per terabyte there. Again, changing from brand to series, M2 NVMe Gen 3 to 4, of course, making all of the difference. I swear those guys are driving me mad today, but the point still remains. If you've got a system or at least a facility or a NAS that can occupy a lot of M2 NVMEs rather than hard drives, sometimes the performance benefits of SSD will save you time and therefore money, that it can make it viable to go for more of these rather than fewer of these. Just don't lose sight of that durability angle and the fact that NAND, particularly if you go for that QLC, but any SSD in general, has a wear limit that is just so much lower than that of archival hard drives long term. But this has been, should you go for the Seagate Ironwolf NT series of hard drives there. Again, whether you go for standard Pro NE or the Pro NT series, which again, not enough people are talking about online because it is a distinction, you're going to get a good hard drive there. And in terms of large scale hard drives for NAS, you're going to get a drive that's got good capacity, a bunch of services included in terms of warranty, support and durability, and monitoring the drive at all times, and probably one of the best price points per terabyte out there available at the moment. But with that, just factor in, you're getting a noisy hard drive there. You are getting a drive that at the moment has a slightly confusing price point online that hopefully will change. And if you go for the bigger drives, you've got to deal with that all eggs, one basket scenario, as well as increased power consumption where you are. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Again, there should be a link to the massive review of this 20 TB drive in the description below. Do check that out. And again, if you've enjoyed the video, click like, subscribe to learn more. If you're still on the fence about the right storage system for you, use the free advice section over on NAS Compares, the big blue button on the right hand side of that page. Alternatively, free community forum over at Ask NAS Compares, manned by me, Eddie and others to help you answer your questions. And finally, if you've enjoyed this video and if you found it helpful, very important there, if those two things are true and you were going to go to Amazon anyway, go use those links in the description. Using them costs you nothing extra, and anything, and I mean anything you buy there, results in a kickback coming to me and Eddie here at NAS Compares. It's just us, which allows us to continue doing what we do. But apart from that, have yourself a great week, and I'll see you next time.